Good morning and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Quran of the Muslims. Yes, we're back once again, breaking this thing down verse by verse into factual, logical statements in English so that you and I can understand who or what is Allah. What does he mean by the contents of his book here, which is quickly disintegrating under intense scrutiny? What does he mean by the contents of his book here, the Quran of the Muslims? And more importantly for us as non-believers, how does this affect us in our lives in the world today? So as I always do before I start, I'm going to tell you now, if you have any doubts or questions as to the things I'm about to say or wish to question my factual accuracy, please first buy and read one of these, an Arabic-only Quran that looks like this, not an English one, not Quran.com, not the Google translated falsity, because they're not the same as this. This is the only perfectly preserved word of Allah. Note to self, don't buy this particular one because it kind of sucks. It's tacky and it fell apart. But after you've bought, read, translated and understood an Arabic-only Quran, which is the word of Allah, you will agree 100% of the things I'm about to say now or have previously said are 100% true of the words of Allah and what Muslims believe today, despite the fact that they will deny this, and we'll go through why that is in just a moment. So, with that in mind, let's carry on. If you've been keeping up with the series, you'll recognise that we are partway through the book AL-NISA, which is book number 4, the book of women and children, which you would think, oh great, this is the part where we get to the women's rights, where they glorify and beautify the women in the spirit of God, because God's so merciful and all-knowing and lovely. Absolutely not. That's not what you're going to find in AL-NISA. What you're going to find in AL-NISA is a guide for Muslim men how to procure women in the community, pick up sex slaves, orphans, various other types of women that they will find, and convert them through the fist and through shouting and admonishing them into profiting sex slaves who make profit for them so they can pay the mosque, so they can generate many sons who can go and fight the jihad, and so they can enrich their own lives, and they can have the great burden of having like 1 million women lying around who they have to control and use. So with that in mind, let's carry on. So I thought, instead of going through more verses, because we've done we've done a fair bit, we've gone through a lot of AL-NISA already, I thought, let's recap, let's revise what we've done previously and have a little laugh along the way at how ridiculous and absurd Allah's treatment of women really is in comparison to just regular everyday people here in the West. So, let's begin. AL-NISA, the story so far. 1. We learn in the beginning of the book that men may have many, many wives and can lie to them and can basically force them to do exactly what they want, up to and including having children for them. We know this because Allah actually commands, so it's not even like this is not a request. This is Allah commanding. If you're a good Muslim, if you want to treat your women fairly, then you will do this. And what that means is you can have up to 4 normal wives, you can have another 4 who are concubine wives, and then you can have extra slave wives on the side. So the maximum number of wives you can have is undefined, but we think it's 4 good Muslim wives, 4 extra wives you took as prisoners of war, and you can have up to 9 concubine wives. And then when you pick up more, you can still have a harem of concubines who are not your wives, who you have sex with, but even though they live in your house and they serve you, they're not your wives and you treat them worse. And actually you share them out with the community. So it's like a community service for them. You know, you're serving the community proudly by offering them these concubines. And that is in the Quran. Wives, however, can only ever have one husband and must always obey them and never lie to them, and cannot have any harem of slave men. It just doesn't work that way. And the reason is because Allah gives men a degree of power over the woman and says the woman's testimony is worth half in weight of the man's. So this has the unfortunate effect of making it totally lawful for a man to lust after and have sex with virtually any other woman he wants and lie about it and then be forgiven at the mosque just for paying some money, and it compels the woman to go, oh, I want you back, oh, you're forgiven, even though in her head she's probably thinking, I want to kill you, but she can't. The second unfortunate effect it has is on allowing the men to become arrogant in their relationships and feel like women are just property. They don't marry for love, they marry for convenience and for the mosque, so that they can have sons to go and fight the jihad, and so they can make money for Allah to go towards the war chest. That's what that means. Then we move on. Point number 2. Because husbands hold the power over their women, they also control all of the woman's belongings and their wealth. Men receive twice the inheritance of a woman, and the rest of the money goes to the mosque. So there's some consternation about this, because Allah, in his great wisdom and mercy, even though he said he makes no mistakes ever, when he was calculating the inheritance, he divides the inheritance into fifths. And as you know, no, sixths, sorry, not fifths. He divides the inheritance into 6 pieces. And you think, okay, so there's 6 pieces, I'll give away 6 pieces. But he doesn't. He only gives away 5 pieces. Then there's 1 left over. Then in the next example, he gives away 7/6. And the reason is because he starts talking about halves in relation to sixths. And as you know, if you've got halves and fifths and sixths, if you're calculating things in this way, you're going to be left with a portion left over, a decimal place. But they didn't have decimal places back then. They were still using fractions because decimal places had not been revealed to Allah in his great mercy and wisdom. He obviously forgot. So that means you're either going to have not enough money to fairly give out the inheritance, i.e. you're just going to keep it, give a bit to the mosque, or you're going to have too much and you're going to have a piece left in the street which no one's allowed to pick up. But we know from the evidence of Mecca not being littered with various pieces of gold and money lying in the streets that weren't able to be inherited, that either Allah's maths is wrong or the Muslims are going to have to calculate the inheritance wrong. And this means less for the woman. And finally, men must give a portion of all the money they make from the women back to the mosque. So that means the reason why they have so many women, despite the fact that women are going to cost them money because they have to pay the mosque per woman they have, it's a usury tax. Even though they don't call it this and they go, oh, the evil Jews, they have their usury, we hate usury. What they are doing here fits the description of usury, because what they're doing is putting the women to work as concubines, having them earn money, taking virtually all that money back and keeping it for themselves, as long as they give a portion of it to the mosque. Because the mosque are administrating Allah's will on them through the Quran of the Muslims, which is the tome of instruction, based on the Book of Wisdom, which is what Allah says. So we know in point 2, point 1 is very clear that women are worth less than men. Men are allowed to have a lot of wives, but women are only allowed to have one husband. And as a husband, you're allowed to lust after women and do what you like, but as a woman, you have to be really good, tell the truth, obey every command, and always forgive your man, even though he's got like 10 wives. Point 2 says that women have no power. A woman is always going to be overpowered in law by a man through physical force as well. And all the wealth and produce of that woman belongs to the man. The inheritance that the woman's going to get is very limited, and in certain situations she's not going to get any. For instance, if the man deems her too stupid to be able to spend it, or if she's actually retarded, in that case she's just a slave. She doesn't get anything. And the way this works is it's administrated by the mosque, who are the witnesses, and Allah's the witness. The women aren't witnessing any of this at all because they can't. They're not actually deemed intelligent enough or responsible enough in order to do that. Point 3. Disobedience in women is punished by degrees, and the degrees go like this. You shout at them, tell them they're useless and worthless, have them sleep on the floor outside. If that doesn't work, you beat them. You beat them and bully them. If that doesn't work, you starve them. If that doesn't work, you beat them, lock them in a house and starve them until they die as a warning to the rest. And that will either work or they will die. So that's the final degree. And the reason they do this is because women are filthy and indecent in the eyes of Allah in the Quran of the Muslims. And also therefore the Muslim men, because they are not allowed to have any ideas or thoughts outside of what's in here. Otherwise they are infidels, off with your head, you're dead, you're in sin and burning forever. That's what Allah says. 3. Although that was 3. So we're still in 3. Women are punished by beating, bullying, admonishing and starving to death. They are penalised as well for being raped or even making accusations of rape. Now, why is this a much bigger problem in Islamic countries than it might be in the West? Well, it's because a woman is worth half of a man in testimony. So, let's say you have a concubine sex slave and she sees 20, 30 men in a day. If 3 of those men have raped her, she needs 6 witnesses in order to say those men have raped her. Not only that, they all need to be men. So that means every single time this happens, considering most of the concubines have sex with their clients in private, you're not going to find any witnesses, and if you do, they're not going to be men. If you need women, you need 12 witnesses. And when the witnesses have spoken against the men, they are therefore going to become infidels because they did not preach up the religion. They did not cover the sins of their brothers as instructed in Al-Imran. So, ladies, gents and Pikachus, the long and short of it is, Satan's going to be loving it because women are going to be punished for being women. That is how it sounds to me. That is how it's written in the Quran. And then we come to the final point of 3. You love this as well. Women are Muslims can part exchange their wives at any time with no penalties. What that means is, say Jimmy Mohammed grows up and he's got like 3 wives. Then he takes some sex slaves and some orphans off the street and makes them concubines. So he's got 4 in his haram. What are they called? Is it haram? Yeah, harem. He's got 4 new wives in his harem waiting to go. You know, harem sex slave wives. They're not his real wives, but they're treated in law as if they are wives. They have to belong to him. He takes all their money, has sex with them. And one of them becomes his favourite. This is described in the Quran. One of these women is his favourite concubine. She's lovely, pretty, even though she's an infidel. He can beat her down to make her become a Muslim through beating, starving, admonishing and rape. Once she has surrendered her will to the husband and to Allah, he can then swap out one of his wives for that concubine. So the wife then becomes a concubine, and the concubine becomes his wife. And then when that happens, the wife who then gets thrown away and becomes a concubine loses any, she's not allowed to come back to the house. She gets no money for this, and he can still have sex with her because now she's in his right hand. And this can happen as many times as it needs to happen. There's no limit on that. There's no indemnity against that. There's no punishment for having done that for the Muslim man. Although the woman, we'll get to later, she is punished by this more than the obvious. So we know from that point that women are virtually worthless apart from baby machining and for having sex with for the Muslim man. Oh yeah, and for earning money for the mosque for Allah's cause of his holy jihad, which is basically why they have all these women knocking around, to make money. Oh yeah, and one other point which is in the text but I forgot to put in here is men are punished very severely for fornication, which you'd think meant what we think is fornication, but no. Allah describes fornication as masturbating or having sex with your wives too much on Ramadan or when they're pregnant or when they're on their period. So during those times, when you want to masturbate, when your wife's pregnant or on her period or during Ramadan, you can't have sex with your wives, but you can have sex with your concubines or the weakling men. So what that means is, and you have to pay to do that, even if it's your own ones, you pay yourself and then you pay the mosque. So that means during those times, Ramadan, any type of fasting, during the times when all your wives are pregnant or menstruating, you are having sex with the harem that you've built up or someone else's concubines, and then that is generating you money and a portion's going back to the mosque. So we know the reason they have all these women, rather than just having a wife, is to make money to go to the mosque, for the war chest, for the jihad, and hopefully some of these women will become pregnant and they will have baby sons that can swing swords at the evil Jews, so Satan can be pleased and the children of Israel can be deaded. That is what this means. Point number 4. Men can have sex with their slaves and concubines and will also profit greatly from this, as long as the mosque does also. Allah demands sex trade, and he calls it a trade and traffic which should be encouraged and is in fact in law. Again, so that the mosque can get paid, as we previously just went through there. And to top it all off, these poor women are held to a much higher standard of law and morality than the men are. But they get none of the rights and none of the legal protections. And if anything happens, the man is not responsible for the sins and indecency and the filth of the women. The women are totally responsible, even when it's the fault of the man. And this is directly in law. So what we can tell from point 4 is willful or strong women are bad and should be controlled with violence, rage, or sexual crimes. Women are to be controlled strictly because they are not responsible, and we know that they are filthy, indecent scum that need to be beaten, admonished, starved, and raped in order that they become obedient and they surrender to Islam. And because there's so many of them, they are held to a higher standard. And if they dare show any dissent, disobedience, or they fail to do what they're told and surrender to Islam, there is a range of punishments from shouting, making them sleep on the floor, to starving them to death. You can legally kill your wives and your concubines if they disobey you. And if they want to argue against you, they need to find twice in way of witnesses who are men, who will be willing to become infidels just to speak against you, just so their claim can be validated, so they can go back to the husband and go, "Ha, told you." Which will result in them being beaten, admonished, and then divorced. And as we know, once you've been divorced, twice you've been divorced, that is all you get. Then you have to dispose of yourself in the proper fashion, according to Allah, which means go and blow yourself up or kill yourself or drown yourself outside of the town. Don't make a mess now, don't leave a messy body to be cleared up, and certainly don't admonish or shame your brothers. Point 5. In Islam, women are seen as filthy and indecent, lesser creatures than the men. Women are nothing but plant pots and grow bags for the men to use to plough their seed into and to make money from. And the final point we reach in number 5 is paradise is only for men, hell is mainly for women. We know this because paradise is filled with men and that the hell is filled with women. And you might say, hang on a minute, when the Muslim men are talking about the paradise, they seem to think it's full of women. And you'd be right, it is full of women, but not the women from the life on earth. The women in the paradise are 72 virgins who are created there as sex slave robots by Allah as a reward for having died in a jihad or been an obedient, faithful Muslim. So what that means is the women that you are married to in life ain't going to be one of your 72 wives in the hereafter. So you think, what happens to all these wives? I've got like 7 wives. Where do they go in the hereafter? They mostly are going to go to hell and burn forever. But the ones that don't are going to be reborn as buxom, virtuous virgins and then just spread about the place. Because in the paradise, the virgins are available to everyone. So it's not expressly described how they are. How do these people stay virginal? Obviously, once you've used them once, that's it. Do they just go to the hell and burn then after that? Or do they regenerate each time into virginity? I.e. there's not actually virgins. We don't know, it's not described. Allah is not very picky about his 72 virgins. And I think the reason why it doesn't have to be picky about them is because they're not a thing. They don't actually exist and the Muslims are never going to get them. You will never get this, you will never get this. Reminds me of Borat. So the Muslims will never get them. They're just like a carrot on they're like a fishing rod with a bit of sweets on. Come on over here to make the Muslims do the jihad. And they are there to remind the women, you are not worth anything, you have to obediently do what your husband tells you, because Allah has decreed it. And that's point 5. Point 6. Wives must prioritise teaching the sons to go to their jihad abroad, and not staying at home and being peaceful. That is expressly forbidden. If they stay at home and they're peaceful, they are cowardly sons and they are weaklings who will be mistreated. Whereas if they prioritise going to the jihad and killing the Westerners in the stealth positioning or the full jihad, then they will be praised up and they will bring nothing but honour back to their families, and the woman will be rewarded for having taught her sons correctly and not beaten, admonished and starved. Paradise is for the men. Oh no, we've gone through that bit. Those who do not, send their sons to the jihad, those who do not are damned in life and shunned and damned to death in hell forever and will get no reward in the hereafter. So we know they don't get any reward in the hereafter anyway, on the small degree of a chance that they make it there. The reward in the hereafter is 72 virgin brides. So obviously an old woman of like 80 who's had 20 sons isn't going to want 72 brides. They're of no use to her whatsoever. Unfortunately for the women, there is no system of them getting 72 virginal husbands. There is no sex slave husbands in the hereafter. It's only for men and sex slave women who are created as virgins and then presumably either destroyed or regenerated afterwards. So we know through this, women are worth nothing even in the paradise, and mothers must teach their sons to go and kill all the non-believers and be hateful of other cultures and be racist, because it says so in here, the Quran of the Muslims, with the cover falling off. And that brings us to our final debate point, number 7. This is the worst one. Women must always forgive the cheating, lying, violent men every single time, because if they don't, the sin is upon them, not upon the man. Women are seen as inferior creatures and have no say over their marriages or their upbringing of their children. And I quote, "It is impossible to treat women fairly. end quote, according to Allah in the Quran. So the reason he says this is because women are going to whinge and moan. They're never going to be happy no matter what you do. And the men are, and I quote again, prone to greed and born weak. So that's the reason why women will never be treated fairly. And it actually says women will never be treated fairly in the Quran. That's the quote. So we know in point number 7, women get no reward at all in life or in death. The paradise offers the 72 virgin brides to only men, which is not going to be these women. That's not going to be them. They're going to be reborn as another virgin bride for someone else. And we know that because they have to accept lying, cheating, being beaten, their sons being brainwashed and given to war, and they have no power and no wealth, women are effectively head child in the responsibility ladder of responsibility in the household. So you have Allah telling the imams telling the men telling the woman, and the woman telling the children. But the children, once they learn a little bit about the Quran, if they are male, are above the woman. So actually, when the children are older than like 10, it goes like this. Allah, Muhammad, imams, Muslim men, grown-up children, women, then small children, toddlers and stuff. And that's just how it goes. The woman never climbs the ranks of the hierarchy, can never go and fight the jihad unless she is going there as a witness to other nations, in which case she's actually considered to be a concubine. And she will never be able to have a career of her own. She will never build up wealth. She will never be worth or equal to a man. And even if she is perfect in her life, according to Allah's jihad and his Quran of the Muslims, the best thing that she can hope for, after suffering and being the 7th wife of Jimmy Mohammed for like 60, 70 years, the best thing a woman can ever hope for is to be reborn as a virtuous virgin of someone else and part of a group of 72 other virgins. So, in summary, we know AL-NISA describes how women are worth virtually zero, apart from as a profit-making venture for the mosque and for the man. They can only have one husband, but they have to be one of many wives. They don't have control over the childcare arrangements of their sons or their daughters. The daughters get given away in marriage very early or become sex slaves if they are useless or retarded. And the men have to be trained to swing swords at Jews and Christians and go and do the jihad. Otherwise, the woman gets punished, the husband gets punished, and the child gets punished. And that is the Quran of the Muslims. If you are worshipping, and you don't want to have Satan following you at Allah's behest, because we know Satan is a Muslim. So, that's the end of our reading and the end of our verses. In summary, women have no value and are treated poorly. Their only value is to grow sons and to make money for the Muslim men. And the entire thing is encapsulated in the jihad, the end times genocidal prophecy cause of Allah to kill everybody else on earth and push Islam into all the other foreign nations via indoctrinating and brainwashing the innocent Muslim children, with the woman as the tool in the right hand in which to do this with. It's not very nice, but it's what they do. And they will deny this, and they will lie about this, and they will say, but that's not what we're doing now, is it? And then you have to remind them, if you're in a debate with these Muslims, the only reason you're not doing that, O Muslim, is because of our laws. You're in a Western country now. You're in France, Britain, Germany, America. Our laws prevent you from doing that. Our morality prevents you from doing that. If you could, Allah in the Quran of the Muslims would be having you follow this to the letter, and actually says our laws are unrighteous, our laws are full of sin, and you are an infidel for having followed them, unless you are doing it as part of a stealth jihad, which is how we know that is what you are doing. And that's the end of this video. So I hope you really enjoyed that and you learnt something. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now. And so we reach the end of another Without Lies, Islam Dies. For another day, so we'll be back tomorrow at 7:15 a.m. I'll see you then. In the meantime, have a lovely evening. God bless you all. And I will see you, beautiful people, in the next one. Bye now. Bye.